Explore the chilling tale of the abandoned lighthouse, a ghostly beacon, in this spine-tingling narration. Let the story begin. The old lighthouse stood sentinel on the jagged cliffs, its weathered stone tower a stark silhouette against the stormy sky. For generations it had guided ships safely through treacherous waters, its beacon a comforting presence in the darkness. But now it stood silent and abandoned, a forgotten relic of a bygone era. Mark, the new caretaker, trudged up the winding path to the lighthouse, his backpack heavy with supplies. The wind whipped at his face, carrying with it the salty tang of the sea and something else, a faint acrid smell he couldn't quite place. As he neared the entrance, he couldn't shake the feeling that unseen eyes were watching his every move. The massive wooden door creaked open, revealing a dusty interior bathed in shadows. Mark fumbled for his flashlight, the beam cutting through the gloom to reveal cobwebs and long-abandoned furniture. He made his way up the spiral staircase, each step groaning under his weight as if in protest. At the top, he found the keeper's quarters in disarray. Clothes were strewn about, drawers left open, and a half-eaten meal sat mouldering on the table. It was as if the previous keeper, old Tom, had simply vanished into thin air. The logbook lay open on the desk, its final entry a hastily scrawled message. "It's here. God help me, it's here." Mark's skin prickled with unease as he read the words. What had happened to old Tom? The official report stated he had retired and moved away, but this scene told a different story. He pushed the thought aside and set about cleaning up the quarters, determined to make the place livable. As night fell, Mark lit the beacon, its powerful beam sweeping across the churning waves below. He settled into an armchair with a book, the rhythmic flash of light oddly comforting. But as the hours ticked by, he became aware of strange noises echoing through the tower, scraping sounds like nails on stone, and faint, distant whispers that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. Mark tried to rationalize the sounds. Old buildings made noise, after all, but he couldn't shake the growing sense of dread that crept over him. He found himself constantly glancing over his shoulder, half expecting to see something lurking in the shadows. Sleep eluded him that first night, his dreams plagued by visions of grasping hands and glowing eyes. The next morning, bleary-eyed and on edge, Mark explored the lighthouse more thoroughly. In the basement, he discovered a hidden door, its edges caked with a strange dark substance. His heart pounding, he pried it open, revealing a narrow passageway that seemed to lead down into the very rock of the cliff. Curiosity overrode his fear, and Mark ventured into the passage. The air grew colder and damper as he descended, the walls closing in around him. After what felt like an eternity, the passage opened into a vast cavern, the sound of crashing waves echoing off the stone walls. In the center of the cavern stood an ancient altar, its surface stained with what Mark horrifyingly realized was blood. Scattered around it were bones, human bones, and tattered scraps of clothing. Among them he spotted a familiar piece of fabric, old Tom's favorite sweater. Panic gripped Mark as the terrible truth began to dawn on him. This lighthouse had been more than just a beacon for ships. It had been a beacon for something far more sinister, something that demanded sacrifice. As if summoned by his realization, a low, inhuman growl reverberated through the cavern. Mark spun around, his flashlight beam revealing a monstrous shape emerging from the shadows. It was vaguely humanoid, but twisted and wrong, with too many limbs and eyes that glowed with an otherworldly hunger. Mark ran, his heart pounding in his ears as he scrambled back up the passageway. Behind him, he could hear the creature giving chase, its unnatural limbs scrabbling against the stone. He burst out of the hidden door and slammed it shut, bracing himself against it, as the thing on the other side pounded and clawed. Gasping for breath, Mark realized with horror that he was trapped. The creature knew he was here now, and it wouldn't stop until it had him. He thought of old Tom and all the other keepers before him, lured here by the promise of a quiet job, only to become unwitting sacrifices to this ancient evil. As night fell, once more Mark barricaded himself in the keeper's quarters, the beam of the lighthouse sweeping uselessly across the water. The noises grew louder, more insistent, as if the very walls of the lighthouse were alive with malevolent energy. He could hear whispers now, clearer than before, promising him power and knowledge beyond his wildest dreams, if he would just give in. Mark covered his ears, trying to block out the seductive voices, but they seemed to penetrate directly into his mind. He found himself drawn to the window, gazing out at the churning sea below. For a moment he thought he saw faces in the waves, beckoning him to join them in the depths. A thunderous crash from below snapped him out of his trance. The creature had broken through the door. Mark could hear it ascending the spiral staircase, its inhuman growls growing louder with each passing second. He looked around frantically for a weapon, anything to defend himself, but found nothing. As the doorknob began to turn, Mark made a desperate decision. He flung open the window and climbed out onto the narrow ledge that encircled the top of the lighthouse. The wind howled around him, threatening to tear him from his precarious perch. Behind him, he heard the door splinter as the creature burst into the room. Mark inched along the ledge, his back pressed against the cold stone. He had no plan, no hope of escape, but the primal instinct to survive drove him on. The creature's head appeared at the window, its glowing eyes fixed on him with predatory intensity. In that moment, as he stared into the face of an evil older than time itself, Mark understood the true purpose of the lighthouse. It wasn't just a beacon for ships, it was a lure, drawing in unsuspecting souls to feed the ancient horror that dwelled beneath. And now, he was its next meal. The creature lunged, its misshapen body contorting as it squeezed through the window. Mark closed his eyes, offering a silent prayer to whatever god might be listening. But as he prepared to meet his end, a blinding light suddenly filled the sky. Mark opened his eyes to see a massive shape descending from the clouds. A ship, but unlike any he had ever seen. It was made of gleaming metal, its hull adorned with strange symbols that pulsed with an otherworldly light. A beam shot out from the ship, enveloping both Mark and the creature. As they were lifted into the air, Mark felt a sense of profound understanding wash over him. The lighthouse had indeed been a beacon, but not for the evil that lurked below. It had been a signal to these beings, these guardians from beyond the stars, alerting them when the ancient horror threatened to break free. Mark found himself in a vast chamber, surrounded by beings of pure light. They communicated not with words but with thoughts and emotions that flooded his mind. They showed him visions of an eternal struggle between light and darkness, of cosmic forces beyond human comprehension. The creature that had pursued him writhed in a containment field, its true form revealed as a mass of writhing tentacles and malevolent energy. The beings of light surrounded it, their combined power forcing it back into dormancy. As the visions faded, Mark felt himself being lowered back to the lighthouse. The beings of light had cleansed the area of the ancient evils, influence sealing away its power once more. But they warned him that the battle was never truly over. There would always be a need for guardians to watch over the boundary between worlds. Mark found himself standing once more in the keeper's quarters, the first rays of dawn breaking through the window. The lighthouse felt different now, cleaner, lighter, as if a great weight had been lifted from it. He knew that his life would never be the same, that he now bore a great responsibility. As he lit the beacon one more time, its light seemed to shine brighter than ever before. Mark settled into the keeper's chair, his eyes scanning the horizon. He was no longer just a caretaker of a lighthouse, he was a guardian of reality itself, standing watch against forces that threatened to plunge the world into darkness. The lighthouse would continue to guide ships safely to shore, but now it served an even greater purpose. And Mark would be there, keeping the light burning, a silent sentinel against the encroaching night.